Hey, you there, in the baby registry rabbit hole. The thing experienced parents agree on? A Nanit Smart Baby Monitor. One camera, one app for video, breathing motion monitoring, and personalized sleep insights. All in one place. Check in from anywhere, get real-time safety notifications, and capture every sleepy smile and goodnight kiss. The best part? Those insights help you get more sleep, starting night one. Add it to your registry or shop at Nanit, nanit.com.
Today in Radical Personal Finance, Let's try that one again. Today on Radical Personal Finance, it's a special live Friday Q&A from 2026 Radical Family Camp. Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. My name is Joshua Sheets. I am your host, and today on this Friday, as we do on any Friday in which I can arrange the appropriate recording technology, which today includes multiple microphones, speakers, and a live audience, and Joshua nervously trying to do all the things he usually does in private, we do live Friday Q&A. Normally, you can call in, ask about anything you want, raise any questions or topics that you want. Today, however, we have a special live Friday Q&A show in front of our live audience at Radical Family Camp. And we're going to begin with a special panel presentation. We have been talking here at Radical Family Camp about iterate today and execute tomorrow. And execute today and iterate tomorrow. One of the themes that we have been discussing is a lot of family aspects. And today I want to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is that of family business. But we're going to do that in the context of a panel discussion. So we're going to begin with my three panelists here. Take a moment for the podcast audience. And David, you start off. Give us a quick introduction to who you are so that my podcast audience can meet you.
Sure. I'm David Stein, and my podcast and family business is Money for the Rest of Us. We've been doing this 12 years. I work with all three of my children. My two sons are partners in the business. Our daughter edits the podcast and has the same ownership opportunity as she chooses to do so.
Yeah, so I've known David for a long time, and I've admired his business. And David has the oldest children of this panel who are working with him. How old are your children?
34, 30, and 28.
Wonderful.
Ish.
Yeah, so
once they get that old, you sort of lose track because it means you're getting older too.
So we had another panelist with older children who was going to be here, but he was sick and unable to make it. So you're going to represent working with adult children. And let's move to Mikkel. Mikkel, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mikkel Thorpe. I host a podcast as well called The Expat Money Show. We've been going for 10 years straight. I work in the offshore space, so I deal with tax and immigration and legal issues. I'm not a lawyer myself, but I have full-time lawyers that work for me on my team. We're a team of 31, 32 people. We help people move offshore, and we deal with everything that entails. From the family side, I started this myself. However, my mother works with me for the last 10 years as well, full-time. My wife helps out. She's a stay-at-home mom, so she helps out with a lot of these things. And then, interestingly enough, my 9-year-old is actually starting to do things. So she is now editing some of the YouTube videos and things like that. But actually more interesting is we bring her along to all of the conferences that we go to. Every time we have board meetings, she sits as an observer role. We have a full-time chef that cooks for us in our family, so I don't go out for client dinners anymore. I make all of my clients come to my house. My daughter sits there. She's had lunch with Joshua and stuff like that and participates in the conversations. So we're training her very, very young to be able to take over a lot of these things.
I think I'll introduce Greg in a moment, but I think that is a really important example of how being involved in the family business can and should happen from a beginning age. I know for me, one of my dreams was always that as soon as my children got old enough that they were always involved in what I was doing. I took my eldest to the first conference that he traveled with me at 6 years old. And it hasn't worked exactly like I thought. None of my children are here in this room because they're out playing with their bazillion friends outside. But I have found that that is kind of the starting point for me, is just involving your children in your life and involving them in those discussions. And years ago, I heard a story of, I don't recall who to attribute it to, but he said that just what his parents did for him was that at their daily dinner table, they had a scene of guests, right? A constant inflow of guests coming through from all over the world, from all walks of life. And at their dinner table, they traveled the world. They got to know people of all exposure, of all backgrounds. And I think that that is a really good foundational thing for us to build on, especially while we have young children who are not yet capable of advanced work. Greg, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Gregory Treat. I am a lawyer licensed in Texas, and I do and I am now a podcaster. I've just started the Great Houses Forum, so it's a baby podcast besides my other distinguished panelists.
Greathouses.forum.
Greathouses.forum. So I work with estates and succession planning, family governance, the principles, the procedures, the structures that allow families to set their children up for success in the family business, have ways of resolving the disputes that will inevitably arise, and really in a way that repairs and makes the family stronger and helps them be competitive as they continue to carve out the territory that they need to in the future. So
Greg, tell me a little bit about the family businesses of your own life, your past, and also your own vision based upon that past.
Well, as you know, we've discussed at length on some of the podcasts that we've done, you and I, Joshua, the family business that most impacted me was my family's business. My grandfather, my mother's father, owned the ranch that I grew up on, and I got to see high quality family-driven leadership, decision-making, planning. I watched him cultivate one of my cousins into the next heir apparent of this multi-generational ag business, and I got to watch him manage. You know, we had family traditions where when new hands kids, you know, the situation I'm thinking of is a new hand would move onto my grandfather liked to have hands from Brazil and Japan mostly because he had relationships with landowners and ranchers there. So a new hand would move there. Their teenage kids would not know the language, would not know anything, and so my grandfather would pair them up with another family member, and you know, those sorts of techniques, those sorts of institutions, things that I took for granted as a kid. When I became a lawyer many years later, you know, established businesses, families that were moving towards a second or third generation would have problems that they would talk about in the context of the legal environment that I was in, and I would have solutions and ideas on how they could solve problems that they very much did not expect from a lawyer, and that's kind of part of the story for me has always been, you know, seeing the world the way my grandfather saw the world. One of his rules was never ask anyone for something if you don't know how much it'll cost them. Right? He said that was his first rule of leadership was he. Now, that didn't mean that he wouldn't ask people for things that cost them a lot, but he always wanted to know in advance, and he was so patient, almost like to an outsider, maddeningly patient. He would just sit and kind of sift through a person, learning about their life, learning about their character, learning about who they were, until he understood what the thing he was about to ask them would cost. And he wouldn't ask them of it until he knew that. Now, sometimes he would ask things that we burned the relationship down, right? This was more than that person could really do for us. And when our family was struggling, sometimes we asked for a lot. But he would understand what he was doing. I think I've seen a lot of business owners in my life burn relationships down by accident or not realize that they had asked for more than this person could give them. And that's where you make strategic mistakes. That's when you get caught short. That's when people's betrayals hurt and matter and affect the bottom line, is because you didn't know that you were asking for too much. So that's kind of a precedent. And then, you know, all the horsemanship and the ag and the care for the land and all the lovely things that sort of existence permits you as a man, as a human being. That's kind of my core primary experience with family businesses. And then what I've done with my life is I'm trying to spark a renewal of people that are forming great houses. I think that having a multi-generational approach to life, having a framework that says, hey, not that we dislike people, or not that it's the end of the world if you don't work with your family. Although, for me, it was frankly the end of my world. Having tasted what it was like to be on land with my family members, 4 generations, as my grandfather would say, born, bred, bled, and died on. Then to lose that was like losing a family member that was closer. It was like I lost every member of our family changed when we lost the land. And so for me, having the recognition that was the best way to live, in my opinion, and that was the good life, I want other people to have that. I want people to know that that's an option. And there's a lot, I think, in our modern culture, there's a lot of, I guess, just negative PR around the idea of great houses and having a multi-generational framework and leaving an inheritance for your children, despite the fact that the sacred books of all the major religions say that's a good thing to do. And so I want to see families understand that it is a good and glorious thing for them to provide for their children in the context of a business arrangement, and that's what I've built my business around. And I've been making enough money to keep doing it. And I'm very, very privileged and blessed that is the case.
So you yourself came from a successful family business. The business,
not that successful. We did lose.
Oh, I was just about to say the business fell apart.
Yep.
But it wasn't due to family dysfunction. It was due to external forces that wound up destroying the business.
Right. Remarkably so. I mean, very unusual for a family business to have that outcome.
Right. So almost an external attack that was successful against it. Your family lost. And then coming from that successful multi-generational business over time, you have the vision to rebuild what once was. David, what led you to want to work with your children? Did you come from a successful family business?
Joshua is the one that led me to work with my children. We did a call, and he raised the question, what type of business are you growing for your great-grandchildren? And up to then, I left a very successful business. My partners bought me out. We worked together for 17 years. We had sold the firm. We bought it back. When I launched Money for the Rest of Us, I was not launching a business. I was tired of saying, we think this. We think this about markets. We think this will happen. I wanted to say, I think this. That's all I wanted. And because podcasting is a terrible business.
Amen.
Think in the sense that who starts a business where the median outcome is failure, where the top 20% is failure? The median podcast gets 200 listens. So we're a top 1% podcast. Joshua's a top 1% podcast. It's not a great business, but it is the business we have. And so the vision is to just be able to keep going. That and maintain our nap culture. We take naps every day. I've done it for decades. I learned it in Mexico, siesta. You can't do that in traditional business. That's what we do at our firm.
Amazing. Mikkel, what led you to develop this idea of multi-generational business?
It's a hard one. I suppose I've always been a bit of a contrarian. I don't know how many people here know my story, but you were mentioning before about your children not finishing high school. I stopped school at 12 years old, and I started traveling internationally as a teenager. And I have just always done things rather different, I'd suppose, than most people or than the norm. And the more I learn and the more I would start to understand the world, the more frustrated, I guess, I would kind of get with the way that things were done. And I just think that a lot of people are lied to. And I just wish that a lot of people would just tell the truth, and the media and the politics and everything like that would tell the truth. And so I think when I started a lot of this, I just wanted to tell the truth about what was going on and what I was seeing. Now, I've traveled to 120 different countries in the world over the last 26 years. I've lived in 9 of them. My wife is from China. Our family's super international. I think I see things from different perspectives that most people just don't see. So I do think I have an interesting, to go back to your presentation earlier about lead an interesting life. I think I do have an interesting perspective on things. Now, I've built up a sizable amount of wealth during my life that I do not need to work anymore. It's fine. I could play golf, but I'd be super bored, and it's hot golf in Panama. So I got to do something, right? So I guess I keep doing this because I am... Okay, addiction has a negative context to it, but I can't find a more accurate word. So I am addicted to business, to work. I am a workaholic. My biggest problem is not a motivation to work. It is a motivation not to work. But I think that I can help people, and I like being with people at a transition moment in their life. I like it when a client gets it, like they understand. A lot of people come to me with so much stress and anxiety and fear in their lives, and then day after day, week after week, month after month of working with me, I see their shoulders kind of drop, and their pitch and their cadence and their tone kind of slow down. And a lot of the fears that they were so worried about, we've kind of like worked through all that. And I swear that moment and that realization in a client's life is just so cool. Like, it's just so awesome that I keep doing this. And I really feel like I have family goals and I have professional goals. And I just want to continue on with this and just keep going. And I want to show my kids how amazing it can be to be of service to others. Like, we have enough money. We don't need to do this, but I still want to be of service. I still want to help people. I still want to do something of meaning with my life. And I think that's why I'm bringing the kids into this, and my daughter, and I encourage you to come and speak to her this weekend. You'll see her running around. And, she already knows that she will either take over the consulting firm we have, or she will take over the investment firm that we have, and she will run one of them. I don't know. And we've got other businesses, and I got a bunch of kids, so hopefully we'll keep growing businesses and find things for these kids to do.
I shared recently on a podcast a story that impacted me enormously of a businessman that I met recently, and how these two things of having children and having a family business are closely related. On the one hand...
Hey, you there, in the baby registry rabbit hole. The thing experienced parents agree on? A Nanit smart baby monitor. One camera, one app for video, breathing motion monitoring, and personalized sleep insights. All in one place. Check in from anywhere. Get real-time safety notifications and capture every sleepy smile and goodnight kiss. The best part? Those insights help you get more sleep, starting night one. Add it to your registry or shop at Nanit, nanit.com.
The more children you have, the more businesses you're going to need, because to some degree, right? You could just have a giant monster business and you can fit them in and whatnot. But you kind of look and you say, all right, here's this child that has these interests. How could I engage in an opportunity for there? But then the flip side is often just not enough children to actually grow the business. And the story that I heard was founder, super successful, raised his 4 children on the property of the business. It was a manufacturing company. They were totally all in. He's now stepped back finally. And in the second generation, there are 4 children, but there are only 5 children in the third generation. So these four people of this founding generation, they're at a point where they would love to be training up their successors, but none of the third generation is interested in the business. And my immediate thing was, well, if there were 12 children in the third generation, then there would probably be at least 1 or 2 that are really interested in the business, and the other ones will find other interests. Is that something that you gentlemen, does that make sense? Am I right? Am I wrong? Go ahead, Greg. Yeah. Or whomever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the to use the religious language, you're mythologically what you're asking your children to do is be Jesus, right? That's what Christian cultures do, and so when you have too few children, then asking one person to be Jesus is a little much, right? I mean, even Jesus, it killed him, right? So I think having the framework that says we want to have a lot of kids, that's part of what gives you optionality. That's part of what gives you freedom. If you have one child, or even 2 or 3 children, a lot of times, I mean, I'm familiar with a bunch of businesses where the business owner had 3 children, sometimes 2 sons and a daughter, sometimes 2 daughters and a son. And there is just an enormous amount of pressure on that one son in the latter case. And it's hard because there's no backstop. There's no, a lot of times it'll even affect what level of risk taking they're willing to engage in personally, because it's all on them. And if they, get crippled, or if they have, they kill themselves, then they can't meet all of these obligations. And that's not the way you want a young man thinking, frankly. You want a young man to go out to believe that his family is the pillar that upholds the sky, right? And if the more that you can do that, the better outcomes, ironically, you'll get. Johann Kurtz has a great, the name is escaping me right now, but the Becoming Noble Substack has a great article exactly on this topic of what happens when you have too few children in a business context. And so, I have definitely seen, and it's not even just with one kid, but even with 2 or 3 children, the real impact of, wow, there isn't enough people. And sometimes it's not even just that they're not interested. I actually do tend to think that you can, if you raise your children properly, you can manufacture direct interest. I think that I would describe a generation of children not being interested in the business as a management or training failure. Now, you're not going to get everybody, right? If 1 or 2 leave, okay. But if 4 or 5 or 10 of your children don't, something else is at work most of the time. And sometimes it's, people have. I was talking to Mikkel a couple like a month ago now about talking. We don't want to train people to hate the business, right? I think a lot of people train their children to hate their boss and train their children to hate the business that they work for, and that can happen among family members as well, not just unrelated non-family member employees. But if you have let's say you've done the good thing, you've done the training, you can manufacture interest to a great degree. But you just don't have the skills, right? You have people that you had a dad who was a 5-talent dad, and each of the kids has 1 talent. And so they each are willing and faithful and earnest in doing the thing that they're really good at, and you're 2 talents short. And what do you do? Right? Because if you bring in outsiders, and that is what you have to do. You have to bring in outsiders, or you either let the business collapse, break down, grow smaller, which is frequently a death sentence. Or you bring in outsiders with all that entails. The only families that I've known that made it through that was 2 daughters and a son, and both daughters married son-in-laws with the exact right skills, and that was, I'll call it statistically unusual, is what that was. So you can't count on that.
So everything doesn't always go well, and I'll share a story that I've never shared on the podcast, and who better to share it than the man who's closer to it. So my dad happens to be here, and it's one of the family business failures in our family history, and I think this will kind of insert the other side of the story and kind of be a way of what goes wrong. As I'm doing that, if you in the audience have a question that you would like to ask, please just line up here on the left-hand side, and then after this, we'll go ahead and start asking questions, and you can guide the conversation. So this is my father, David Sheets, and I want you to tell the story of your father and grandfather.
All right, that's an interesting story. Just a little bit of background. My grandfather homesteaded from Texas to Colorado somewhere around 1920, something like that, and built up a cattle business in the mountains of Colorado. And my dad was more of an educated person, went to the University of Southern California, served in World War II, and was living in Southern California, but he had health problems with his knees. And then an oil company, I don't remember which one, came in and started drilling oil near my grandfather's place. And my grandfather was convinced that they were going to strike oil, and he couldn't handle it. And so he extended the invitation to his 3 children to come, and he couldn't handle the business by himself. Well, the other 2 didn't take him up on it, although they were very capable. But my dad put 2 and 2 together. He liked the ranch there. His doctors told him to go to the mountains. It'd be good for his health. And so he moved from California to Colorado on a trailer that he built and packed all his stuff. And I was 6 years old at that time. And he went there expecting to buy the business from my grandfather. So it was a cattle business where they raised alfalfa in the summertime and then fed the cattle through the winter. In the summertime, the cattle ranged on the range, forest range. So, but I would say that this is probably the most important thing that could be taken away. My grandfather was a perfectionist. He wanted everything done just so. And so if you went and built a fence, this is the simplest example I can get, he would line that post up down the way, build a thing, and he would stand back and look at it. Everything had to be just right. My dad it's good enough. So when he built a fence, as long as the fence was keeping the cattle out, that was good enough. So when he built a shed, well, that was good enough. So you had 2 very different personalities, and that was the root of the failure. So I'll bypass all of the details, but just the specifics of it. The Forest Service required, the permit was the permit for the forest had to relate to the land. So my grandfather owned the land, and over the years, my dad had built up the cattle. And so they called in the government and says, listen, all we want is a father-son agreement. That's all. You don't have to corporation and so on, but just some agreement, because right now we can't connect the cattle to the land. And so my dad drew it up, presented it to his father, and my grandfather, one answer was, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And that broke it. Just that broke it. And the reason behind that is that my grandfather thought that my dad wouldn't be able to manage the business because he wasn't the same personality. And his whole retirement was built up in that. So he was afraid my dad would not succeed, that he would lose his retirement and he would have no money in his older years. And so he never trusted my dad. He always told my dad he's the boy. He never brought him into manhood. And thus, the failure was basically personality, but also lack of trust. And the Forest Service, well, then you can't have a permit, although the whole place depended on the permit. So it came down to a crisis because my dad had kind of depended on that his whole life. That was his plan, even after our boys left the ranch. And I won't go into the details of it, but he finally says, well, that's all I got to do. So he gathered his stuff together, put in a pickup truck, and went away and went back to school, because both of my parents got their master's degree, went back to teaching, and had to completely leave the ranch. So on the surface, it looked like a very good possibility. I mean, what's farming? My brother wanted the farm, and I enjoyed farming. But I would say the takeaway is, in a family business, there's got to be respect. There's got to be, I don't know what the right word is, but there's got to be some agreement in your philosophies, because how can you work with somebody that you don't respect? And I've seen some other family businesses. I worked in a company for 30 years, which was a family business, and I watched after the old man died, that started the business and set it all up, I watched it. I watched two of them take over the business and lock the third one out. They changed all the locks on the doors, locked them out, and took over the business. And that was a very painful thing to see. So I've seen it. And I was invited to be part of a family business, which probably you don't know, Joshua, but...
Do tell in front of all my friends, please.
You asked me, you gave me the microphone. I had an uncle that helped me get started. He was an electrical engineer, and he helped me get started an electrical engineer and a radio. And he started his own business in Montrose, Colorado. And when we left the Philippines, he wrote me a letter and he asked me if I would be part of that business. And I could have moved there. I could have taken over the business, and I don't know, that's what he wanted me to do, but I had different goals in mind at that point. And I watched him set up the business, and I'd say, if anyone did it right, he did it right. And here's what he did. He brought all of his family members in and made them board members. They were the decision people, but he didn't require them to be the CEO. He didn't require them to be the expert. They could hire somebody to do that, but it was still a family business. As far as I know, I don't know if the business still exists today or not, but it was harmony because he didn't require them to be active participants. They could, but if they didn't have the skill, then there was the problem. The family business that I worked for 30 years, they tried to bring everybody in and make them part of the business, but they didn't have the skill. And it was very obvious to the rest of us. They were not good in this position, and therefore they weren't making that much money. They made it, but their one goal was to provide a job for their children or their relatives. It wasn't to advance the business. And that's the danger that I see in a family business. You need to establish, if your goal is a family business, to make jobs for your children and grandchildren, okay, but don't equate that necessarily to good business decisions to make money. So anyway, that's my thoughts that come to my mind.
I'm going to ask you for solutions. Thank you, Dad. I want to ask you in just a second, how can we solve some of these problems that are part of my heritage? But I realized something, Greg, when you and I were talking last night, that break in the family business, we don't have any divorce in my family, so I haven't experienced those emotions that some people have experienced. And I didn't really realize till I was lying in bed last night, and I was realizing that break that my dad just explained of relationship, right? Basically, this thing that broke the relationship between my grandfather, my great-grandfather and my grandfather feels like a family scar, and it feels dishonorable. So instead of me looking at my great-grandfather and saying, here was a titan of a man, he's a totally honorable man, it feels like you destroyed me. And I didn't realize that. That's just a personal thing until you were sharing yourself last night. And so this can lead to trauma. Even if we avoid other forms of trauma, this can lead to emotional reactions like that. David.
In thinking about some of these challenges, a couple things to consider. One, with our family business, when my sons, I gave them half the company because it wasn't worth anything. Because it was tied to me, right? I was a podcaster. It was an influencer business. I mentioned it wasn't a great business. But the idea was that we'll build something together. My oldest was interviewing with startups, well, we're already a startup. We've been around 8 years. Let's build something together. It's their business. And I'll wait for them to come up with the ideas, the business that I'm in now didn't exist 10 years ago. Or 15 years ago. There was no podcasting. There wasn't really any influencer. There wasn't any YouTube. And so when we talk about turning over a family business, we're really talking about turning over an ongoing relationship that we have. The best part of our business is our Monday morning meetings, and we talk about what we did that weekend, what's going on. We do talk about business, but that's not the point of the business. It's the relationship. But we also have paperwork in place. There's an operating agreement. If there's a disagreement, I know what I owe my sons if they leave and how they'll get paid out. And so you have to have the structure in place. But the idea of it's a family business, it doesn't have to keep doing the same thing. It won't. It can't. Because if the kids aren't interested, then it's not going to work. It has to be what they want to do. So who knows what our family business will be 10 years from now.
Yeah. I think, and you can go ahead and pass the mic to Greg. I think sometimes, and I'm thinking about family businesses, I've been thinking about Jim Collins and his idea of get the right people on the bus and then figure out where the bus is going. And what you described is something I think should be a key part of it, is that we've got the right people on the bus, our family, in some way, and let's get more people on the bus, and then over time, the bus is going to go in different places.
Well, I think the question, and I know your dad's already sat down, but I'll just put it to you. Do you think that the reason why your dad said no to his uncle, and I don't know if if there's an experience that you might have had that you'd feel comfortable sharing, if you saying no to a business opportunity, do you think that is related to that you made a decision that you might not have made, right? If your dad had said, well, this is a good thing that we can do, and I go, maybe he was a CEO of a family business for many years, and your lives would look totally different, and maybe even materially be better, right? I'm not, people get out of life what they put into it, right? But do you think that decision, that those things are related?
I would say, Dad, feel free if you want to say something, but I would say that experience that you've described caused you to exclude business from the important parts of intergenerational transmission. Yeah. Do you want to feel free to come up if you'd like to say more? Come back up. Because we have a very strong family in many aspects. Just stand over here so we don't get in front of the speaker. We have a very strong family, but not in business. And I think that this experience is part of that reason. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that particular situation with my uncle, we had a good relationship, and I respected him because he helped me. He was one that took me to the University of Colorado when I had to take a special exam, and the business was something that I can do. It was not out of my realm. I just had different goals in my life at that time, but I could have taken over the business. It was in Montrose, Colorado, mountains, skiing, everything. I could have done that, but it wasn't because of him. It was because of my own goals didn't fit that particular business at that time in my life. And it was a hard letter I had to write to him. I said, Fred, I'd love to come, but I just can't do it in faith right now. I can't do it. But I think he did the absolute right thing in the way that he organized the business to avoid future problems. He was sharp. He was a good engineer.
I remember being a teen. Oh, go ahead.
Well, but had that situation been handled differently, let's say your brother takes over the business after your father, would that have made you more likely to say yes to your uncle? Had you had that story in the back of your lineage?
It could be because, at that time, I didn't have any specific ideas, but it could have made a big difference in my thinking and so on. And as I'm listening to this idea right now, I definitely think that the idea of a family business and what Joshua has shared with all of his siblings and so on, I think it has real value. I just say without any expertise in the subject, the foundation needs to be laid so that you're not boxed in that can destroy relationships if a family member doesn't choose to go that way, and to make sure that the expertise that you need to make the business successful is properly utilized. And that's what I said. I worked for a family business for 30 years. But because of the way they set it up, they didn't bring the right people in to make the business grow. So it just kind of went along and provided jobs. Yeah.
And Joshua, did you have any experiences similarly where you said no to what might be an objectively good deal where, and do you think that family history might have had anything to do with it?
I think that family history made me mad. And I say that because, while I can't put the specific date on it, I know that when I was about 20 years old, I looked at my family, and I really love all my siblings, my sisters and my brothers, and there are 6 surviving children. And I looked at all these like capable people, and I just thought, man, if we could all get on the same page, like it'd be amazing what we could build. But each of us have done our own thing in terms of business and worked together very lightly. And so from a very early age, I just always had an idea that if no one else does it, I'm going to create some Sheets Enterprises in some way, and it's going to happen. And it's been in the back of my head for 20 years, just probably, I think, because this story makes me mad.
Well, one of the things I know I'm asking a lot of questions. Thank you, David. So the thing that I would say to the audience is, in every single case that I have ever consulted with, I am not aware of any exceptions to this. If a person doesn't want to receive business opportunities from their family or pass them down to their family members, it is always, in my experience, the result of a generational wound. There is always some bad story, because my profession is, I sort of say, well, why do you feel that way? And then they tell me something, a generation, 2 generations, maybe sometimes 3 or 4 generations back, where this went badly, right? I mean, people have told me stories that have been passed down since their family was kicked out of a family homestead in Britain and, basically came to America. And that story is still with them, still affecting people's behavior, still, like, when they are evaluating business opportunities in the modern, in 2025 and 2026, right? They are thinking not about, is this a good business, objectively based on my understanding of this? No, they're thinking about a story about people that have been dead for 100 years. This is not, to put it mildly, what you would recommend for getting high quality decision making about your life choices. Okay. And that's I'm not aware of a single exception to that rule so far.
I believe it, and I'll give the opposite. You want to add anything? Okay, so I'll give the opposite. Ryan, come on up. Here's the other story. So just kind of a different side. And Mom, I need your help. You can tell it, or I'll tell it. Would you like to tell it? I want the story of Grandpa and the road construction company in Texas. Do you want me to tell it, or do you want to tell it? Okay, just nod along, make sure I get the dates right, because usually I tell the story myself, and it's a little fuzzy. So on my other grandfather, so here's a positive story of how it can affect you. My other grandfather was a businessman, and he was a farmer, but he was a businessman, very aggressive from a young age. So as he built up his farm over time, he started a road construction company. And as I recall the details, and my mom is still nodding, so as I recall the details, he and his business partner went and got a contract to build roads in the state of Texas. But they were from Colorado. And when they arrived in Texas, they discovered that they had not done their estimating properly, and the Texas sand, or whatever the dirt was, destroyed all their equipment. And so they went down to this job to make money, contracted to do the job, and yet the equipment was entirely destroyed, and they wound up going absolutely deeply in debt, desperate to try to finish the job. If I understand correctly, they finished the job, but my grandfather's business partner said, "That's it, I'm out." Did he leave before the work was done, or? Before the work was done. Okay, so he left before the work was done. My grandfather went deeply into debt in order to finish the job and fulfill the contract, and he had to fulfill both parts, right? His partner who walked away, and also him. And then ultimately, he was pretty much bankrupt after the affair. It destroyed him. And he spent the next, how many years? Much of his life. As I understand, like decades for him to pay that debt off, because he refused to declare bankruptcy. And so like that, for me, is the other side, is like those giant stories in your family heritage where I say, forgive me, if my grandfather can invest 30 years into keeping his word, and if my grandfather can fulfill his contracts, then I had better never dishonor the family name, right? And so, like, those things go deep. And forgive me, like, you don't even realize, but like those family stories of business. And My grandfather is dead for a long time. He will never know. But when I think if I go bankrupt, like I may go bankrupt, but I will never go bankrupt willingly, and I'll pay it all back on the other side of the bankruptcy because that's how I honor my family name. So it really goes on both sides, and it really builds. Ryan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan. This is my son, Henry. We are from the free state of New Hampshire. My question is not about Bitcoin. I just wanted to poll the room real quick. Could you raise your hand if you have a business that involves partners that are not family members? Anyone have a business with partners that aren't family members? Okay, just a few, actually. Okay, kind of surprising. I thought my question would be more relevant. My question is, I own a property management business in New Hampshire, and it's going great. It's growing well. We're employing a bunch of people now. I love it. But I have business partners that are not family members. I'm thinking about, starting a family business, and I'm curious if you guys know of any examples where non-family business partners have been involved, maybe how that's worked. My personal thoughts are, if I want to have a family business, I'm probably going to need to buy my partners out or start a new business. And I think that maybe that's the conclusion. But just wondering if you know of any examples of non-family members continuing in a business.
Yeah, actually, I know a lot of people. I mean, I deal with high net worth and ultra high net worth clients every day, and not all of them come from family businesses. Some do, but most of them are traditional partnerships. I would say the ones that I've seen are most successful are those where they had an existing friendship on the front end of it. They were college roommates, or they went to school together, or they have a long-standing trust. I've seen it work over and over and over again. I don't think that you have to work only with family members and you can't have other equity holders in there. I think in the family context would be bringing in family members or passing it on to family members. And if that's 50% of the business or that's 25% of the business, that can still be a family business for you guys, right? I would also say that if you are from the free state of New Hampshire, then you and I are probably very philosophically aligned. And I would hope that your business partners would also be very philosophically aligned with us. And I think that that's going to solve a lot of problems. I think that once you get into business and you find out that your business partner is a woke socialist commie, I think that is going to cause a lot of problems, right? So, let's make an assumption that you've chose your business partners well and that you've probably known them for more than, a fortnight or something like that. I think it can absolutely work. I wouldn't get bent out of shape that you didn't found it with your brother or with your parents or something.
All right, thanks.
And one thing that's inspiring to us, Thomas, come on up. One of the things that is inspiring to me is that imagine, and this is what Greg has given me language for over the last year as we've talked. Imagine if family weren't the only form of committed relationships, of covenantal relationships that we acknowledge. Right? Imagine if your wife and your husband or your brothers or your sisters and your parents weren't the only relationships that you had around. Right? Imagine if you were in a community and there were two other men that were completely committed to you, and who said, we are, again, I'm stealing your thunder, we are covenantally committed to you. We are going to take a covenant to some degree to say, I am here for you. I am loyal to you. I will support you. You are here for me. You are loyal to me. You'll support me. I will raise children who will continue our relationship. You will raise children and heirs who will continue the relationship. And imagine if that continued generation by generation, and imagine if that expanded. Imagine if you came into your local church and there were 10 of you together who didn't just worship together, but who worked together. And we have the context. Imagine if in your local neighborhood there was other forms. And so what I have realized when we recorded that podcast that Greg did, and he said that the shortest of all of our covenants is the covenant of marriage. I had never thought about that before he made that statement to me, because the covenant of marriage is the one that ends at death. And all of the other covenants that we have an obligation to raise up heirs to continue the covenant. So that to me is what's exciting, because that's how I want to live and that's what I want. Thomas.
Hi, my name is Thomas, and that's actually a perfect lead-in to my question, because my question is, how have you all thought about a generational handoff that preserves mission and vision? And I know not everyone on the panel might have experienced this, but I'm sure you guys have witnessed it or seen other families. So kind of the follow-on to that is, how do you have examples of other families, historical or contemporary, that have actually succeeded in this missional handoff? Because it's going to take another generation to keep that type of covenant going. And
Well, I'll let Gregory do the examples because you are an encyclopedia in that. Okay, last year I was here and I gave a 2-hour presentation because I was not time capped, and so I just went. And then we sat in a round table and I did another 4 hours straight. So I did about 6 hours with you guys. The main thing that I was talking about, and I think why Gregory really liked me last year, and we became very dear friends, and still do after an entire year of speaking to me, is that I understood very, very quickly that I actually don't own my wealth. So, you hear about all of these types of things of an inheritance and making 25% and 25% for each child. That is not how our family works whatsoever, okay? In a nutshell, not doing a 6-hour conversation from last year, but in a nutshell, we have an operating company. We pull out as much capital from the operating company as we humanly can every single day, every single month, and we plow it all into a family business, okay? The family business can be a family trust, a family limited partnership, a family foundation, private interest foundation, something like this, okay? I am a beneficiary of this over here, okay, on my right hand, okay? I'm a beneficiary of this, all right? My wife is a beneficiary. My children are secondary beneficiaries. We have language in there on passing it on. But I can put my hand on the Bible to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I own nothing. I have hardly anything to my entire name. My entire wealth is owned by my family. That means it's not mine. I can't, it's a complete mind shift switch on all of these things. So it is as much my 11-month-old's baby, it's as much her wealth as it is my wealth, okay? My job is to steward it. That means to grow, to protect, to multiply, to leave it in a better shape. And that's what I want to teach my children now, to do those types of things. So this is what I think about every day, is how I can be a good steward of the wealth, not worried about division or worried about handing it off or anything like that. I am teaching my children to be stewards right now, as we speak, Mm-hmm. And so I don't have to go, okay, there's going to be, we're not going to divide it up. We're not going to have an inheritance. We're not going to have any of these types of things that most families go through, because the mentality is completely different. And I didn't make up a lot of the stuff. I'm just doing the stuff that was through society up until basically the last 100 years or something like that. So I think of it like a lost knowledge or lost skill or art of all of this. And I'm just trying to bring it back and implement it into my own life. Gregory, what do you think? You're the expert here.
Well, as I always say when we have this conversation, the distinctive term for this used to be civilization, right? This is what it means to be civilized, that you pass things on. I mean that quite technically. So the Romans drew a line around the world of what parts of the world were worth conquering, and the parts of the world that were worth conquering were the parts where people cared for their parents and cared for their grandparents, and they believed that's what made them accumulate wealth, which is why they believed they were worth conquering by the Roman Empire. And the rest of the world was barbarians. So I think the first step is to recognize that you have to be the best game in town. So it's a worthiness exchange, right? So when you put your family, when you recognize that your family exists, that it has an identity outside of the individual members, that you are more than just a collection of interchangeable economic units, You are a family, and that has reality. And for most of the families that I work with, that has some degree of connection to their faith tradition or their spirituality. But even there's families that I know that are really not very spiritual in any meaningful sense, but they still believe, they have this core sense that the family is almost a person, right? Almost an identity that exists. It's not any particular person. It's not perfectly identified with my father, though generally the father, the grandfather, the ancestor is closely aligned with it. But it's the best parts of your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather. It's the parts where they most lived up to the inner moral qualities. It's not the parts of them that were petty on Thursday mornings because they stayed out too late on Wednesday nights, right? You do the hagiography, and it's good and it's true because you're saying what is the thing that my family is, okay? So first of all, you got to live up to that. You got to be worthy of that. And you place the money, the capital resources, the assets into a structure that says the people that are at least the people who get access to these resources are the people who are trying to be worthy, right? So if somebody seeks to dishonor the family, seeks to tear down what they've built, seeks to oppose their views, well, I mean, hey, you're a free person. You still have all the rights of an American or whatever, citizenship you have, but you're not going to do that with family resources. Right? You're not going to use what the family has given you to tear down what the family has built. You're just not going to do that. And to some extent, that's why we've all gone into these business type structures, because in many ways the only association that's allowed to continue doing that in the North American context is the profit seeking entity, right? So that's there is a mindset shift that takes place where it's about, again, seeking to be worthy, and then telling your children, hey, this is the pathway, and being honest about things that you don't know. One of the things that I always tell families is there's a lot that you don't understand about the situation that your younger family members are in, and the only people that can help you learn that is them. So you're going to give them your job as an elder is to have wisdom, right? Which is not a knowledge of how things worked in the past. It's a knowledge of the deeper principles that made them work in the past. And so you're going to go into things and there's going to be failures. And the real way to do generational succession is not to say, well, I've got this structure that activates on my death. And after I've died, on your worst day, when you're racked by grief, when you're hit with all this financial uncertainty because the main rainmaker, moneymaker is dead, right? On that day, you've got to go in and deadlift the emotional equivalent of 350 pounds, right? That's a bad strategy. Having never lifted, right? That's a very bad strategy. Most adult males can, if they pursue it, can get to the point where they can deadlift 350 pounds, okay? But you probably can't do that tomorrow if you're not a lifter. You will probably hurt yourself, and that will cause a bad outcome. So shifting away from, hey, we don't want to have transfers at death. We want to have a lifestyle that says, this is just who we are. We participate in the family economy, and we're rewarded for doing so. We're mentored. We're given the resources when the older members of the family don't know, when they don't have wisdom, and when the younger people don't have skills. There's forgiveness. There's a way forward. There's an understanding that, hey, you were talking about capital is what gives you optionality, right? There's an enormous amount of capital in a generational relationship that you, if you give each other grace, if you say, well,
hey, you there, in the baby registry rabbit hole. The thing experienced parents agree on? A Nanit smart baby monitor. One camera, one app for video, breathing motion monitoring, and personalized sleep insights. All in one place. Check in from anywhere. Get real-time safety notifications and capture every sleepy smile and goodnight kiss. The best part? Those insights help you get more sleep, starting night one. Add it to your registry or shop at Nanit, NANIT.com.
Has anything actually on fire at this moment? Well, no, nothing's on fire. We've got food in the fridge, right? We can keep going. We can continue to pursue this, and a lot of that again is, what is the heart? What are the values? What are the virtues? And if you look at those people, like as I'm listening, I've never met you before until I heard your presentation, a couple hours ago, and what I came away with was, this is a man who loves his children, right? Who's motivated by the desire to be in relationship with his children. that family business is going to be very, very resilient in the face of setbacks, right? If you don't have that, then your family business is going to be extremely fragile, right? Many families that, many Asians on the West Coast have fragile families because there is no give. If there is ever a failure on the part of the young person, in terms of their skill set, if there is ever a failure on the part of the older generation in terms of their wisdom and their ability to predict things, then the whole thing breaks. I've seen it shatter entire families. It just kind of rushes through and they die, right? But it doesn't have to be that way, right? And it's not that all you need is love. You have to have skills. You have to work hard. You have to all those things. But that is the thing that makes generational succession. Really, the final piece that I'll say is you got to go around. You got to take, if you want to have an heir, you got to go around to all your business associates. Take 5 years. This is what John Hancock's father or uncle did for him. Johann Kurtz taught me that. You go around and you say to all your business associates, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." Right, which is the words that Jesus Christ receives at his baptism. Right, when he becomes a man, his father says, "This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And you're not God, so you can't do that in one dramatic moment. You're going to have to recreate that moment gradually over time, and you're going to have to go around to all these different people. But someday, Mikkel's going to hold a conference, and someday at that conference, at the big day, and I'll be there if I can possibly, no matter what's going on, I'd crawl over broken glass to watch this happen. I've seen this happen 3 times at a conference, and it lights the room on fire to see a father pass the mantle to his chosen heir, right? And I mean the most memorable one, the guy, he literally formed his hands into a crown, and he crowned his daughter and said, she's now the CEO of all these things in front of all of these people, hundreds of people in the room. And he did it. Okay. And he did it in Dallas instead of in sunny California, which I couldn't understand why he did it there. But anyway, but that's what makes it all worth doing. And that living succession, that living passing of the torch, and saying, "This is my son, this is my heir, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." If you can do that, if you can say that for 5 years at every opportunity, then you will succeed, right? If you can keep loving each other through that. That's what I believe, and that's what I've seen.
Thanks for the comments. What I'm hearing, right, especially from Mikkel, there's no replacement for living that value of stewardship that you want your kids to model, right? And starting them young and shaping them and helping them see that this is the mission and watch me live it. And, with Greg, I mean, you were talking about everything that plays into it, not just that, but even the stories that are told and the values, the actions of that actual handoff at the end there. You were mentioning about John Hancock. But thank you for that, and I'll pass the mic.
John, come on up. I desperately wish that Tim were here, Tim Yarborough, because his talk, there's a hole in my program calendar here because he's not here, but his talk was dedicated entirely to what this is that it's pursue a 2-generational transition. So you just have to come back next year and listen to it, because we went over the outline and... Yeah, exactly. We went over the outline, and his entire point is that your success is measured by your transition. Your success is measured by how seamless the transition is. And if you can accomplish that transition, you can keep the family going. But if you're just determined to hold on, come hell or high water until they put me in the box, it's gonna fall apart.
Well, and your children are what you really are, right? People can say a lot of things. People might even believe a lot of things. But what you really are on the inside, that's what your kids will be. What you really believe, what you talk about in your house and around your table, and how you view the world, that's what your children are. They are the demonstration. You get this word like a proof, as in a mathematical proof, right? They are the demonstration of your character. And that's one of the other things that I was thinking about this earlier when Mikhail was talking about non-family business partners. You have to look at all the information. And all of the information includes sitting down and having dinner and watching the other family's kids and seeing how wise they are and seeing how loved they are and seeing how fearful they are and seeing all of those things, because that's the person you're going into business with.
And by the way, I just brought you to Panama, and did I have you travel alone? No. I asked you to bring your family. Joshua too. Joshua brought his two oldest down to see, because I wanted to spend time with the kids. I wanted to spend time with more than, because I don't just look at one person. I look at the fruit. So
the evidence of our capacity is, can we reproduce? That's why we're talking about iterate tomorrow, right? If you cannot extend your values and visions in those that you have the most time with, and those that you are the closest to, and those the ones that you love the most, if you can't to some degree at least say, like, this is what I want in the world, you are not worthy of leadership. Right? I have to be, they may be physical errors, hopefully, they may be spiritual errors, right? Not everyone will have children, but if you cannot say, here, look at these people and judge me by them, then I'm not sure you're leading. John.
So this probably is going to come across a little antithetical to what we just heard, but what the heck. We're going to start with, the takeaway I heard from this morning was intentionality. I mean, in most of the messaging, it's know what you want and understand that, and then be focused on it. Apply your capital in this way. So David, I'm going to direct this maybe a little bit more to you. So you have a 28-year-old daughter, I think? And right now she has the option to participate in the business, but she may choose not to. And I kind of see, and it's present in all three of y'all as well as your comments. It's very clear that through that intentionality, there's a lot of emotion that gets wrapped up in this vision of carrying along a family tradition and building a great house. Your daughter may choose not to participate in the business with you. She may not take that 25% ownership. And maybe that's because from her own intentionality, she says, there are things that I want that are outside of this, and that's okay. And I guess the question then that I'd have for you is, what advice would you give to her, or to someone like her who says, the family business, such as it is no longer serving me. It's no longer serving my intentions, and I want to step away from that to do something on my own.
Well, in our case, it's broader than the business name. It's broader than what we do. And I think one of the things I've learned, here and from Joshua, it's like the family business, it's the capital, right? It's the family wealth that, as Mikhail has said, is not ours. It's a stewardship. So we invest in our daughter all the time. Like we're fun. I mean, they live with us. They are fine arts majors. They are incredible. My daughter doesn't realize how good of an entrepreneur she is, but she's not willing at this point to do that. She doesn't like to file estimated taxes. It bugs her. But she is working she's quit this job, but she's been working for a guy that runs a peppermint farm. And she comes back and she points out all the things that they're not doing right with marketing and all the problems and all the business things, because she's been editing my podcast for 5 years. I mean, she knows what optionality is, like in her subconscious, because she's hearing these words. And so, and we're putting, we lent money to her spouse, our son-in-law, to go to graduate school. And so it didn't so much about giving them 25% of the business. It didn't matter because they're part of our family, and they will have access to all the capital that we have, financial, relationship, et cetera. And so we're letting them choose their path. And we have always done that. We have never said, this is the path, this is the sport you have to play. We've always let them decide. Now, we have a lot of discussions with Pearl and I whether that is the best choice, but that's kind of just in our nature, not to say you need to do it this way. It's, what are you interested in? Let us help you. Let us find mentors. And they know that if we don't know it, they know to go find somebody else. And so she is part of our business. I mean, she is. She doesn't, I mean, she's not in the operating agreement, but she is part of our family. And so are our two daughter-in-laws, when they're ready. My other daughter-in-law is a tech marketer. And our daughter-in-laws are part of our business because they agree to let their spouses, my sons, cut their salary in half because we're basically bootstrapping a software company. Like that was, and 2 years ago, I was traveling in Japan with my son and daughter-in-law, and Elsie and I were together, and she says, it's okay if you want to, like even before we even thought about doing it, it's like a year and a half before we cut our salaries in half. If you want to cut our salary to help fund Asset Camp, that's fine with me. And our other daughter the same way. And so they're part of the whole organization, even if it isn't, whatever, podcasting. I mean, that's just what we do. That's not the business. The business is the relationship.
Thank you.
You want to comment? Anyone else?
No, just that was a really good answer.
Yeah, beautiful. Go ahead.
I'll give a brief comment. I think just the one thing that I would say, I've listened to hundreds of people's stories. No one, not a single person I've ever worked with has it been, well, I just wanted to go and do other things. When I drilled down and asked them, well, so you're going to go work for somebody, you're going to work this many hours, you're going to live in this quality of housing, you're going to be associated with these kinds of people out there in the machine, right? Or you could live in this other standard of living, work a certain number of hours, be associating with these kinds of people. And almost all the time, the family is wildly objectively better than any opportunities this child has now or in the near future. Like maybe if they win the lottery or get their lucky break in Hollywood, they could ascend. Though I don't know about the quality of people, right? But in every case, what's actually going on there is this person wishes they could stay with their family, feels some deep sense of moral obligation to stay on their family, and they have a very long list of horrible, horrible things that their family has done to them that they cultivate and reiterate in their heads, and that's the reasons that they'll give you for leaving. And that's not a healthy way to live, right? Like, that's not just somebody wanting to go out because they want to do something else with their life. That's not actually what's going on. And again, I only work with the several hundred people that I've worked with that I've had those kinds of, well, it's probably close to 1,000 now. But there's a very limited number of people that I've talked to in the grand scheme of things. And so maybe someday I'll meet somebody that is the exception, but it hadn't happened yet.
Let me mention, keep the mic. Let me mention a concept, though, that I think applies here. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, does our culture believe that when it's time for change, or our organization believe that when it's time for change, God will send us a change agent? Now, that's a theological statement, but I want you to explain, Greg, about musicians in denominations, what we've talked about. And then, does God send you the person who your business needs in the form of a child with different interests in order to survive the next transition? Or did he send you an oddball that you just have to hammer back into the mold?
Right. One of the Joshua and I live between some of the great Christian traditions in the United States of America, in that we see incredible value in the Reformed tradition, and we see incredible passion and beauty and virtue in the charismatic tradition. One of the oddities, you hang around these churches long enough and you're going to notice that all of the good musicians are charismatic, right? There's the number of top quality singer-songwriters and musicians that are in the Reformed world is vanishingly small compared to your average Pentecostal church. Okay, like there are churches that by themselves have as many top artists as the entire conservative Calvinist, Young, Restless, and Reformed movement put together, all of them, and then because I do this, I go and I talk to the people. I'd say, well, where did you come from and what's your story? And what I hear over and over again is about half of these top singer-songwriters in the charismatic world grew up in deeply Reformed Calvinistic households, and their gifts were never honored. There was never any space for the thing that they knew so deep in them that God had called them to do. And so eventually they just left to go to a place where they were celebrated and not tolerated, as some famous success people would say, right? I can't remember who said that, but it might be Zig Ziglar. It's one of those types of people. Got to go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And again, in many of these families, they were tolerated if they didn't do the thing that God had put them on this earth to do, right? And that you just can't do that. And so, I tell this story. It's in one of my standard intro presentations of, the family that you've got the one I tend to tell is the chiropractor. You got a chiropractor, right? And he's come up with some new chiropractic technique. And he has 3 children. And one of his children is OCD, and one of his children is an artist, and one of his children, is always getting into arguments with people, right? And this father is really disappointed because he wanted 3 more chiropractors. And I'm like, man, you've invented a new technique. You don't need 3 more chiropractors. You need 50 or 500, right? To spread your school, your technique across this land. And if you think it's a good thing that your technique exists, if you think that you're materially improving people's lives and that a city with one of your chiropractors in it is a better city, and by the way, there's a chiropractic technique called the activator protocol. And I look to see before I go to a city, are there any chiropractors that have that technique in that city? Because it sort of changes how I think about my time spent in that fair city. Because if I'm around one of those practices, I know that there's this whole long list of problems that I can just show up in this office and say, hey, I'm having this problem. Can you fix it? And 30 minutes later, they have fixed it, and I walk out able to do a presentation or whatever I'm going to do. And so I said, you don't need 3 more chiropractors. You need 50 or 500. And what God has given you is your accountant, the OCD kid, your marketing director, the artist, and the lawyer who's going to keep things going, and maybe even the CEO who's at this moment at 8 years old has no interest in being a chiropractor, is a terrible bedside manner, right? And just wants to argue with everyone all the time. Though I have, I guess, must confess, a fair bit of sympathy for that kid because I was that kid, right? And I think if there's anything that my grandfather and my great grandfather did wrong is there were members of the family that were legally astute, and they went off and became lawyers and worked far away, and they were not there to defend my family in our hour of need, right? And so we look at that as a great opportunity. Now, again, I come from a particular Christian tradition, so I believe is an explicit matter of theology that God does foreordain and intend for you to have the children that you have, right? So if that disqualifies my opinion for any of you, I apologize. That is where I am and where I come from. But I do think that reality reflects this, that you get the children you need. I had a dear friend who passed away a couple of years ago who would always say, your children are the solutions to the problems you will get from doing the right thing. They're not the solution to the problems you get from doing the wrong thing, right? You got to generally solve those yourself. You got yourself into this mess and you can get yourself out. But if you are having problems because you have chosen to do the righteous, noble, virtuous thing, the thing that no one wants to do, then your children generally are the answer for that. That is, ever since that was said to me, I have reviewed all the families that come into my world that way, and it has proven an enormously helpful and accurate framing. So,
amen. Jeremy.
Well, originally I was going to come up here and ask each of you to respond to people that might say that you shouldn't mix business and family or money and family. But Gregory's so long-winded that standing over there, I thought I probably could answer how each of you might answer it. So instead I came up with a new question.
That's a sign of good teaching.
Yeah. Great teaching. So one thing that I've thought quite a bit about over the last probably year from conversations from Joshua and all of you is, it's one thing for me, if I don't have a family business that I'm coming into, to start a family business or start a great house and moving forward, create the family that I may have wished that I had, coming from, not that I had a bad family or anything, just in case they listen to this podcast. But I guess what one thing that I've thought about is, I can imagine a world of my grandchildren and great grandchildren that aren't even here yet. But if I go up to my great grandfather or great great grandfather and think of all the family that or their legacy that I don't even know or have a relationship with one way or another, and just curious any of your thoughts on incorporating extended family and how you might build your family going forward, but also maybe benefit family from higher generations up.
Just quickly, you mentioned one thing where I just want to address it. You talk about starting a family business or starting a great house. What I've really come to realize is that not everybody has to start a great house. You can join a great house, and to be able to identify, which Gregory does an amazing job of explaining, I think is a completely viable solution for a lot of people. And don't ever feel like when you come to presentations or conferences and things like this, that means that you need to be the one to run out and start. Maybe it is. Maybe that is your calling or what you should do. But there is nothing dishonorable of finding somebody who has a mission already, who has a value system that resonates with you, and then making yourself valuable and growing them and helping them in their vision. And with that comes a whole set of rewards. So don't ever feel like you have to start all of this from scratch, okay?
When I was in high school, I grew up in Cincinnati, so Stephen R. Covey of the 7 Habits, Highly Effective People would come and speak at our church. And he talked about being a transitional person in your family culture. Greg was talking about this intergenerational stories, this trauma that comes down. And my great-grandfather came from the Netherlands with his father. And about 10 years ago, we went back to the Netherlands and met with some distant extended family. And we could see trauma there, right? There was something there. There was something. And they wouldn't really say it, but we could see that. And I think about my father. My grandfather was an alcoholic, right? He would send my sister down to the Budna Grill to fill up his giant glass, couple-gallon thing of beer that he would sit at his kitchen table and drink. My father was an alcoholic. I mean, they were not successful business people. But my father was the first one in his family ever to go to college. But the drinking got to him. What his transition was, he stopped drinking. And at the end, he was doing accounting again. But he died at age 54. So my role as a transition is to heal those relationships, to have the kind of relationship with my kids that I didn't have with my father. I remember hugging my father once and having one candid conversation with him. And so I think that be the transition. I mean, that's the start. And finding and heal that trauma by being different and learning from what didn't go right, and then start perpetuating a different cycle.
Anything else? Good. Thank you. All right. We're good? Anyone else? I can take one more question. Zach, you're welcome to. Come on, Zach. All right, this will be our last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Dinner is ready for those who want to go, but we'll just let all the children go, and then we'll come after. Step over here.
All right, thank you. I wanted to follow up on Thomas's question. I heard a lot about stewardship and even not owning anything, and it's all for the family. So I would be interested to hear how you made that paradigm shift for yourself, or how you've seen it play out for other people. Especially, Mikkel, you mentioned, your trust. If you had a sister or maybe a nephew who wanted to join that, like what that would even look like. So,
I don't have anyone else like that. I guess, I have. I left Canada at 17 years old, so my relationship with my extended family, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just we drifted over the last 26 years. So I don't have anybody who's coming and asking to participate, so I don't really have a good answer for that one, unfortunately. I've tried to bring those that I love close to me and bring them in. And well, Gregory and Joshua were at my event, and my father came to my event in Panama and got to see what I've built over the last 20 years, because that's been a challenging relationship for me. And so there was some pretty big breakthroughs, and I would love to see more of my family, us talk about things and things like that. But it's just not a situation that I've had to deal with.
What else?
Well, I was called long-winded. So.
That's not a great way to start.
Poor Gregory.
You want a good answer, don't call a man who talks long-winded.
Was there a second part to that? Just the...
Just the switch from a more individualistic mentality to more that stewardship, and like making that shift, especially here in the American context, that's hard to do.
So this one's really interesting for me because, like I said, I left Canada when I was 17 years old. So, I mean, my entire first few years of my adult life was all about individualism. And I'm a very outspoken libertarian, which is all about the individual. And then I had a baby. And it was like, whoa, like everything changes. And I remember my beautiful wife asleep next to me, pregnant with our first, and just like taking a mental accounting of my life and who I am and what I want to be. And just a realization that this, I have to look at things very, very differently. And I think just being a father is just a massive change. And I think that's just where it stemmed for me.
I'll comment briefly. The question of stewardship is really interesting. I've long, obviously, had an interest in Christian teachings related to finance. And I've read all the books, I've read taken a lot of the courses of any Christian who says, here's what we believe the Bible says about money. What they will all start with is stewardship, right? Because it's the foundation. It is the foundational ethic of Christian principles related to money. All the money is God's, and you're a steward of it. But just because you affirm that as true doesn't mean you know what to do with it. And I distinctly remember when I first started wrestling with that most of the concept of stewardship felt restraining, right? It felt like, why can't I have some money? Why does all the money have to be God's? I want some money, right? And over the years, if you think about stewardship in the context that especially Mikkel described, right, that you are a steward of the family wealth. If you are part of a faithful generational line, you recognize that you have gained far more than you have lost. You have gained support, love, family. And what happens is we have that clear understanding in a lot of aspects of society, except with money. We as Americans, it's all about what I own and what I control, and we don't see ourselves as part of the unit. And so that's been inculcated into us by our culture, by financial planners, and basically the whole dream is about me. It's me, 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 me. And we turn and we look at wealthy people and we're like, oh, those wealthy people always have support. But we don't recognize that wealthy people have support and they have responsibilities. So if you could pick who your parents were, would you pick the parents with whom you were going to start off with nothing and they were just going to do the bare minimum to keep you alive until you could do it and then kick you out and you're going to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Or would you pick the family with $10 million in a family trust that says, we are absolutely here for you and we're going to raise you in luxury, we're going to make sure you would have the best education, we're going to support you, we're going to be in those things, and you're going to enjoy the fruits of it. Here's these houses that we own, here's this property that we own, you can use all of these things that the family trust owns, but you never get it. You get the use of it, but you never get it. And your job is to grow the family. Which would you choose? Would you not obviously choose the homes, the cars, the people, the connections? Isn't that better than being alone? And so the American culture, we're so individualistic, and we've basically cut off so many of these connections that it's very hard for us to realize that. But man, if you were born into a wealthy family and the wealthy family has those things, and you just grow up never knowing want, never knowing need, and always knowing responsibility, then stewardship feels like a great thing. And whenever I've preached on this stuff, like, you don't want your steward dressed in rags, right? If you're a mighty king and you have the steward of your empire, you expect him to be dressed appropriately. So all the stuff about, well, I can't have a fancy car, or I can't have none of that stuff applies. The question is, where is your priorities and where is your identity? And so I think there's a deep connection between this discussion here of stewardship and Christian theology. And if you look at it, it is appealing. But we're just missing that aspect in our culture.
Well, and I just want to speak in defense of libertarianism. I think that Mikkel, the reason why Mikkel takes to these ideas so much is because he is somebody who seeks responsibility. And all people that really, like, who is more of a true individual? Who is more of a true whole human being? Is it the person who can only ever interact with people as monetary units, who has to financialize every transaction, who keeps track of the value of the food? Proverbs talks about a man that knows the value of the food he's fed you every time you've come to his table. What a horrible thing. And what a horrible being such a man would be, right? When you think about what it means to be a whole true human being, you think about somebody who is able to be magnanimous, somebody who is able to be generous, somebody who is able to be of service. That is the ethic that makes you more yourself. In the Christian context, we talk about covenants. The fundamental defining thing that makes a person is the capacity to engage in covenant with God and man. That's it. That's what gives you value, is that God has made a covenant with you, and you have the capacity to reciprocate that covenantal relationship, and that allows you to interact in those relationships with other people as well. That's the thing that makes people, that makes us, that gives us the value that we have. It's not the rights that give us the value. We have the rights because we have the capacity to contract and engage in the responsibilities of life. That's what makes you a person. And so I just think that's the thing that I think you're being a little too hard on yourself, Mikkel.
So a quick story. Sorry, everybody in the room. This one's specifically for Gregory. So I remember a couple of years ago, I talked to my wife, and we're laying in bed, and I was like, baby, why do you love me? Tell me why you love me. Tell me all the ways, She, without missing a beat, and I don't think she's in the room anymore, but she can confirm this. She goes, you're so dependable. And I was like, wow, okay. I was looking for handsome and intelligent and all of these types of things. Why do you love me? You're so dependable. Okay, cool. But it's true. I mean, so if you're going to be known for one thing, I guess that is a good thing.
But, so. I mean, what is dependability? But you kept your responsibilities. You kept your promises. You kept your covenants. You paid your debts. Right? You gave justice. In the Western tradition, is you rendered to all those that were in your life what was their due, not equality. Right? Not giving the same thing to every person, regardless of their fitness or worth, but giving to each of them what is their due. What your wife, what she is, what the honors and duties of a wife, to your children the same, and to your friends and your enemies and all the people that you interact with. That's justice. And so I'm delighted to be in a community of people where we can think about that and have examples. But this is the best way to live. This is the good life. And any time people say, well, but what if we want to break our promises, we want to go in these weird directions, we want to not have these long-term positive relationships, we don't want to reciprocate. With respect, I think that people are doing that out of a sense of pain and frustration and the horrible things, very, very valid, rational things that have happened to them. But if we could see that there's a better way, what could we build? Right? Every good thing that I'm aware of was built because people decided, hey, we're going to trust each other. We're going to come together. We're going to build something great together, even though perhaps that's not the immediately rational thing to do. So anyway, I apologize. Now I really am going,
As I will close us with this. I saw a picture this morning of the Cologne Cathedral in Cologne, Germany. Are you? Okay. Yeah, I would guess. No, I didn't see your slides. I saw it online. Yeah, great. Okay. 632 years to build the cathedral. Come here, Pascal, speak more. I'll stop. Round of applause for our panelists.